What's up, everybody? My name's Trey, and welcome back to another video. And if you are somebody who's been thinking about or pondering about starting a podcast, look no further, because this video is going to have all the information you need to start a successful podcast, because that's the most important part. You don't want to start a podcast and it not work. You want to start a podcast and it be successful. So I'm going to go over the 5 steps that you're going to need to make sure you get done to have a successful podcast. So the first thing that you're going to want to do is identify your topic, your niche, and come up with your podcast name. Because trust me, they all are very important and they all work together. I know there's 3 different things, but it's important that you get all of these aligned for the success of your podcast. So when it comes to your topic or niche. I don't really know how it's said. How do you say it? Leave a comment in the comment section down below. How do you say niche, or is it niche? Do you niche down or do you niche down? I don't know. Leave a comment, see how you say it, because I'm still at in. Sometimes I go back and forth depending on how I feel, I guess. But when it comes to your topic of your podcast, what exactly are you going to talk about? What are you interested in? What information do you want to share to the public? Not only that, but you want to make sure you also niche down when it comes to what topic you're talking about. Because if you want to talk about sports, for instance, that's great. Awesome. But it's going to be really hard for your podcast to be successful against the other hundreds of, if not thousands, of podcasts that talk about sports. Maybe you're somebody that's interested in basketball. Okay, cool. Well, a sub-niche of sports is basketball. Now, what's a sub-niche of basketball? Maybe it's D3 basketball. Is it D1 basketball? Is it EuroLeague basketball? Is it the NBA? Is it a developmental league basketball? There's so many different options that you can go to niche down and really find a place in which people are wanting information, but people aren't necessarily creating content. And that's where you come in. But now that you found your niche, in this example being, let's say, D3 basketball, you want to make sure that the name of your channel makes sense with the topic that you're going to be talking about on your podcast. If you have a channel that says, I love dogs, and your podcast is all about D3 basketball, it just doesn't align correctly to your listener. It will confuse them and it just does not work. So you want to make sure you're picking a niche, a topic, and a name that all correlate together. If this example, so the D3 podcast would be a great name for a podcast that only really reviews and talks about D3 basketball, injury updates, game breakdowns, interviews with coaches. That type of stuff would be a great name for a podcast because, number one, when people see the name, they know exactly what you're talking about. D3 basketball. So when they go to the channel, not only are they expecting to see podcasts on D3 basketball, but they're excited to see it because that's exactly what they want. Now, the next thing after you pick your topic, your niche, and the name of your podcast, you're going to have some channel art for your podcast. And this can be made relatively easily. If you have any type of graphic design skills, you can do it completely for free in Canva. If not, you can use freelance websites like Upwork or Fiverr, where you can pay somebody as little as $5 to actually make you a podcast artwork that can really show off the vibe of your podcast. The next thing that we're going to look at comes to distribution sites. So how exactly are you going to get your podcast, which you spent so much time and love and effort creating, and how are you going to disperse that to people who actually want to hear it? Well, that's exactly what distribution sites do. So this distribution site allows you to upload your podcast to it, and then it's going to upload it to places where your podcast can actually be listened to, whether it be Spotify, Apple Music, Google Podcasts, and a ton of other places where people will actually want to listen to your stuff. Just a few really good distribution sites are actually Transistor, Buzzsprout, and Podcastle, as all of these work really well, and it really just depends on how you want your backend to feel when it comes to uploading your podcast to multiple other sites. And all of these sites let you connect what's called an RSS feed to these different podcast listening platforms, which is essentially you just uploading a link that has all the information that is going to be distributed to all the other sites about your podcast specifically, like your episode title, release dates, your channel art design for the podcast episode, all of that good stuff, all in one place. So in a nutshell, what a distribution site is basically one site that allows you to upload your podcast to it, and then it will get redistributed to other sites that allow your podcast to be uploaded on it without you having to go to each individual site and uploading your podcast. So it definitely takes account. You're going to save a lot of time, and it's going to save you a lot of effort actually doing a distribution site. So I would highly recommend. Now, the next thing that we're really going to have to dial in when it comes to your setup for your podcast is your equipment. So what camera are you using, what microphone are you using, what lights are you using, what backdrop are you using, as those things are really important when it comes to the quality of your podcast. So the first thing that we're actually going to look at are microphones. I'm going to have a link in the description if you want to go click on it. I can give you a review of what I think is the best microphone, but the one that I personally use and what I think is actually the best is the DJI microphone. Basically, this is a wireless microphone that you can connect to your phone, you can connect to your camera, and you can not only have amazing sound quality, but you can also have it wirelessly. If you don't want your mic to be shown, so you can kind of have a more personal conversation with whoever you're actually on the podcast with, you can definitely do that. So I highly recommend check out the link in the description because this microphone is amazing and you will not be disappointed. Now, after you figure out what kind of mic you're actually going to use for your podcast, I would highly recommend that you also record your podcast. As more and more consumers of podcasts say that they want the visual portion of the podcast. So not just a podcast. They want to be able to watch a video of the podcast so they can hear you, they can see you, and they can really get that personal touch on what exactly you're talking about. If you're somebody that's just starting out when it comes to starting a podcast and a video podcast at that, look no further than your phone. Your phone has an amazing camera on the back of it, so just hit record and start your podcast. Not only do you have amazing sound quality because of the mic that you got from my description down below, but you also have amazing video because, let's be honest, phones now have better cameras on them than some actual cameras. But if you're saying, no, that's not enough for me, I know my phone is good, but it's definitely not what I want to use for my podcast, I completely understand. I also am using my phone right now to record this episode, but I also have my Canon 1500 that I absolutely love, and I'll leave a link to that also in the description. If you are looking for a camera specifically dedicated to your podcast or to make videos, I would highly recommend that camera because not only does it have some amazing quality when it comes to not only pictures but videos, it also has a screen that comes out to the side so you can make sure that you're always centering your video, which will help you out a ton. I had a really hard time starting out. I would move to the left, I would move to the right, maybe I would sit back in my chair, and then I was no longer in the center of my video, and because I couldn't see it, I had no idea how much or how little I was actually moving. So the Canon camera that has a swivel out screen on it helps a lot, just to make sure you're in frame and your shots always look good. And then now, so you have your camera when it comes to the visual portion of your podcast, you have your microphone for your audio. You don't necessarily need lights. If you have lights, cool. If you just have a window, you could simply open that, or you can just turn the lights on that are in your room and make it really simple. They just have to be able to see you. It doesn't have to be perfect lighting. You're not having to spend tens of thousands of dollars or anything like that to get this podcast off the ground, as we want to make this as simple as possible for you to get started and really get those listeners coming in. So you have your name, your niche, and your topic. The second part that we went over was the distribution of your actual podcast. So which site are you going to be able to upload it on and kind of distribute it off of there. Third, we went over the equipment. So is you going to record with your phone? Are you going to use your camera? Are you going to use different microphones to make sure that your sound quality and your visuals are good? Next, we are going to talk about what type of podcast are you actually going to make? Are you going to have a podcast where it's more relaxed, where you're sitting on the couch, where you are interviewing somebody in person? Are you going to be interviewing people on the internet, so maybe over Zoom or Google Meet? Or are you going to have a podcast that's more free-flowing and you can do it on a subway, you can do it in a cab, where you can do it on the outside of the street where you're just interviewing random people? You just have to figure out what exactly you want the environment of your podcast to be like. And that's something I unfortunately cannot help you with because that's all personal. As you see, I'm more of a solo podcaster. In terms of this video that I'm making now, it's just me in my room by myself talking to the camera, making sure that I can portray what is actually going on and what needs to be communicated in a way that I think makes sense. So for me, this was the easiest way for me to do that. You, however, might have a podcast host, so there might be more than one person. So maybe you have to figure out what exactly that layout looks like, but try a few different things. Remember, this is all about creativity. You can have as much fun as you can with this. Maybe one day you have it on the couch. Maybe the next day it's in a seat. Maybe next day it's while you're walking to the beach. You just want to try a few things and really see what really feels best to you. Now, what you're going to do after you figure out where exactly you want to have your podcast at, like I said, solo, on the couch, traveling around, you have your phone or you have your camera, you have your microphone. The next step is just simply hitting the record button. And you want to make sure that you're starting your podcast with more than one episode. And I know that sounds really weird. And yes, it is a little bit more work, but trust me, it's going to be important that you actually do so. So you want to make sure when you're starting your podcast, you have at least a handful of podcasts actually filmed first. So you can make sure that you have a catalog of podcasts that people can listen to. If it's a brand new channel and somebody comes to you and they listen to your first podcast and they absolutely love everything that you have to say, you want to make sure that you give them more podcasts to actually listen to. Not only that, but 99% of podcasts fail if they release fewer than 3 episodes. So you can really set yourself up for success if you just simply make more than 3 episodes and release them as soon as you start your podcast. You're already ahead of 99% of people just by making 4 episodes. Now, the next thing that you're going to want to look at when it comes to your podcast is the editing of your podcast. Are you somebody that's going to want to do completely raw, unedited podcast? Most times you want to take out any imperfections in your video. For instance, did you feel how just unsettling it was to sit in that silence? When you have silences, when you have interruptions in your actual podcast, if you have some mess ups when it comes to you tripping over your words, you want to make sure you edit those out just so you can give a clean experience to somebody that's listening to your actual podcast. Now, the next thing you want to do is simply publish your podcast. Because you took all this time setting up your camera, setting up your phone, setting up your microphone, you figured out the location, lights. All you have to do is hit record, which you already did. And you edited the video, which wasn't really that hard. Now you just have to make sure you post it. And you want to give each podcast its own title, its own description. You want to make each podcast feel if it's unique own experience. Not only are you listeners going to love it, but it's definitely going to help you rank and get more listeners to your actual podcast. One of the best ways that I found to actually promote a podcast is not by simply making more episodes of the podcast. It's actually by creating other social media content around the podcast. For instance, so if you're somebody that is actually recording the visual version of your podcast, you can take that video version, you can edit that up into shorts, and then you can post those shorts on different social media platforms like TikTok, Instagram, Rumble, Odyssey, YouTube Shorts, and you're going to get a ton of more listeners and engagement based on that visual content, because that's what people most of the times are consuming when it comes to their social media absolute doom scrolling that it seems like we all kind of get stuck in sometimes. And after that, well, you're off to the races. You know everything that you have to do to actually create your podcast. You understand what the lighting needs to look like, which camera or phone you're using, which microphone you're using to get the best sound quality for your episode. And you really just have to continue to do that. And you have to continue to be consistent doing that. And I promise you that you'll see success with your podcast. And let me give you one other additional tip when it comes to how to grow a successful podcast. And that's making sure that you're actually reviewing your podcast episodes. I know a lot of times, especially initially, I would make a podcast and I would listen to it while I'm actually editing the video, but after I posted it, I wouldn't go back and see the comments on it. I wouldn't look at what the stats are on it. I was just so happy and so excited to get the podcast out, edit it in a way that I think made sense, that I kind of didn't look at it anymore. But I would highly recommend for you to review your podcast or the content that you post to see what's working, what's not working. Maybe people in the comment section say you really need to change your lighting or you need to change your scenery. You want to make sure that you're tailoring your content to the people who are actually watching it. So if every single person in your comment section says, hey, you really need to make sure that you switch your mic because it's a little bit scratchy, you want to make sure that you're appealing to that audience, because if they're listening to your podcast, they obviously want you to grow and they're only going to tell you things that are really going to help you out. And that, my friends, is exactly how you are going to start a podcast this year. And not only start a podcast, but absolutely dominate the podcast industry that you are putting yourself in. I know you're going to have an amazing time. You're going to have a fun journey along the way, making content that you love to make, as well as finding your real audience who supports you and wants to hear everything that you have to say. But if you did enjoy this content, make sure that you hit the subscribe button and notification bell to be notified every time I post a video, and leave a comment in the comment section down below. Are you somebody that currently has a podcast? Or are you somebody that's brand new and you still are just so excited and you're so happy to get the process going? Because we would love to hear, what are you going to be making your podcast about? And just like that, we'll see you in the next one. Peace.